This is our third in our Life After Fisher College series for this semester. We do have a lot of programming left for next semester as well. And I want to introduce our Chief Academic Officer, Janet Kuzer, who will be our moderator for today's panel.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you all for being here. I think this is a really interesting career panel, because I think what you'll find in all of your lives, I think you'll all probably have a crooked career path. And one of the things that we tend to tell you, I know some of you are freshmen, some of you are further along, is that as time goes on, your first job is not always your dream job. And sometimes that first job leads you to ask some questions about what you really want to do and what you really want to be. And it teaches you a little bit about what you like and you don't like, and you evolve. So all of our panelists today started out in one place and ended up in someplace very different. And it may even be very different than their degree and different than what they thought they wanted to be. So I'm just going to give you their names and their titles, and then I'm going to have each of them talk a little bit about that to you. First, I have Nancy Ramsden, who is currently a peace activist and has a long history of different career elements, much around working with children. Our second panelist is Mary O'Brien, who is the Vice President of International Sales Marketing, among other things, and she is with Saucony. Saucony? I've always said it wrong, so that just only learned the correct word there. Mary has found something that was important in her life that has actually contributed to where she has ended up in her career. Catalina is next. Catalina Chu is a controller at High Street Equity Advisors, so she ended up in a financial job and position. And last is Kathleen Keaty, who is a manager at Eileen Fisher. For those fashion students in the room, you should all know a little bit about Eileen Fisher and that story, but she'll give you more of that. So I'd like to ask each of you right now, just kind of going down the list, to talk about yourself for a couple of minutes and what you majored in, when you graduated, what your first job was, and maybe give us a little overview of how you ended up from there to here. Okay? So, Nancy?
Well, let's see. I was born in 1934. At that point in time, there were very few choices for women jobs. The goal was to get married, have children, and live happily ever after. So the choices were basically nurse or secretary. And I chose legal secretary and came to Fisher and got, I think it was the first year that Fisher gave an associate's degree. So I graduated from Fisher in the daisy chain and all of that. And my first job was with a law firm, which was not terribly inspiring to me. I stayed there for a year. Then it was kind of interesting because someone else from Fisher, whose grades were not quite as good as mine, anywhere near as good as mine actually, was picked for the law firm before I was. And I thought that was a little strange. However, the choice mostly was made because she was a very attractive blonde. And that was the way choices tended to be made those days. Fortunately, times have changed.
Let's hope.
So I left the law firm after the end of the first year and became a secretary for a mutual fund company here in Boston. That was a small company. Before long, I was assistant treasurer. After I'd been there a year, I got married, and after another year, I got pregnant, so I left that job. But at Fisher, I learned a great deal about accounting and bookkeeping and reading balance sheets and so forth, and more even at the job. That was before we had computers, and so I remember going over to MIT, where one computer took up a whole room, and we were trying to get the computers to talk to the stock language. Didn't work at that point in time. Now, you can hold a computer in your hand. So I stayed home for the next several years and brought up 4 sons, doing a little bit of this and that along the way. and decided that what I really liked was working with people, and especially with kids, mostly teenage kids. So about the time I had 4 teenage boys, I went back to school, and I went to Fisher Junior College, which was an adult degree program, got my bachelor's and master's degree in psychology with a minor in education, and in the process, interned at a facility for juvenile delinquents. I was asked to become a teacher there after my internship, and I did. And while I was there, we were doing some work with an educational program through the government. And they said, well, you know, if you want to be a teacher, you can do your student teaching here. You're doing it anyway. So I said, okay, fine. So by that point, I had a bachelor's and a master's in psychology, and I was a certified teacher. I decided that, our director left and wanted me to come with him to a closed setting for juvenile delinquents, which was very exciting because he was a disciple of Colburn's, who did the moral development things at Harvard, and we had a really wonderful program going where actually the kids were trusting the counselors. However, at that point, the program passed to a different vendor, and they went right back to the patriarchal punishment process. So I left there, and actually they fired the entire staff because we were not punishing the boys enough, which was very unfortunate. So that was in, I think, around the 80s, and it was a very bad economic time. So there were like 100 applicants for every job. So for a year I was out of work, but then I got a call one day. I had put in all kinds of applications. I got a call one day from some place that I didn't apply for. I couldn't figure this one out. Apparently the woman, the director of the agency, Dear Family Services, that called me was on the board of another company that I had applied for. And I was overqualified for all of them. I couldn't get a job because I was overqualified for everything. It was pretty discouraging. So she called me in to interview, and she said, okay, I was overqualified when I came. If you promise me a year, I'll hire you. So I was hired, and I became director of a mentor program for foster children, hard-to-place foster children, and I worked there for 20 years. And then I retired in 2000 and started this century retired. But I have never sat still very long, so then I took a course in mediation, and am now a court-qualified mediator in the state of Massachusetts, doing mediation in marriage and family, small claims, and teaching peer mediation in the schools, which I love. In the meantime, I've been involved with peace issues all the way through, beyond war, early on during the first nuclear scares, and then several others, up to the point where I went to a conference in Croatia, a peace conference, and heard Dennis Kucinich speak, who ran for president in 2004. Through a series of things that happened, I became head of the home meetings for Kucinich in the state of Massachusetts, and really got very interested in that. It was the first real political thing I'd done. And someone I met there said, well, now if you really like that, you're going to like WILF. And I said, no, I don't have enough to do in my life, really. Well, WILF is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. It's the oldest international women's organization in the world, and it began at the end of the Second World War when Jane Addams assembled a group of women to go over and talk to the heads of the countries that were about to start war. They did actually have some influence on the treaties that were made after the war. And it does a great deal of work with the UN in both New York and Geneva. So I was co-chair of the Boston branch for 3 years, and before that finished, I was asked to become international treasurer, which I have been for a couple of years, and was just re-elected for 4 more years, and have been this past month meeting with people in our Geneva office around the finances, as well as the New York office and the Swedish branch. So Although the whole thing seems pretty crooked, if you back off and take a look, everything that I learned all the way through has contributed to what I'm doing right now.
Sure. I think that it's really an interesting, because you started the legal secretary, and in a way the legal piece has stayed with you, but it's gone in a little different directions. But I'm exhausted just hearing this story. My gosh. Well, that's amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. Very impressive. I sell sneakers.
I know. I feel sort of insignificant personally.
But I like to think it helps people contribute to a healthy lifestyle. So who knows what Saucony is? Everybody heard of it? Not that many. Not enough. I thought I saw somebody wearing Saucony back there. But we're a running shoe company, athletic footwear company based in Lexington. And 34 years ago, I attended Fisher to get an associate's degree as an optometric technician.
We didn't even, most of us didn't even know that it even existed here at Fisher College. This was news.
Yes.
Do you guys know what that is?
Do eyeglasses?
Yep, we worked in optometry offices or opticians. We would, back then, hard contact lenses, we'd teach people how to put them in and out. We'd adjust their glasses, do some of the testing on their eyes, to get their patient ready for the doctor. Lot of whatever you can imagine around the optometrist's office. So one of the things that attracted me to Fisher, unemployment was really high in the 70s, and they had a really good track record of employment rates. So in fact, in the optometric technician program, 100% employment. So I said, okay. I'm a practical person. I didn't really have a 4-year goal at the time, so I said I'm going to get this associate's degree, and lo and behold, I got a job. Worked as an optometric technician for about 3 years, and then started, wanting to expand a little bit more, find some new experiences. And so I went back to school while still supporting myself with, I think, 3 optometric jobs while I was getting my bachelor's degree. I went to UMass Boston, and I got a degree in physical fitness for business and industry, which is kind of a wordy way of describing programs that are corporate health programs, corporate wellness, as well as health club management and health club programs. And so that was something that it was fairly new at the time. Companies were just starting to pay attention, to their employees' wellness. And so at the time, I was also very active in running. That was always my passion. My whole social life kind of revolved around that. My friends all ran, and we'd train together and run races on the weekends or travel somewhere to run a fun race. And I had friends that worked at New Balance and Saucony and other companies around Boston. And after I graduated with the bachelor's degree, I was working at the Boston Racquet Club and running some of their programs. And something opened up at Saucony that a friend told me about, and she was already working in the industry, and I knew that she was really enjoying it, and there was a lot of opportunities. She was learning and traveling, and so I interviewed for this role at Saucony in 1984, which was administrative assistant to the vice president of sales. And I was probably the world's worst administrative assistant, so I had to.
I think I was.
Not that good at it, but I tried really hard. And I also started taking some additional classes at night because I was interested in business. So I took marketing, I took public speaking, I took business writing, really practical things that were going to help me in that role. And eventually, they were growing at the time, and they moved me into a product management role. So also around this time, and for most of you, it was maybe your mothers wore Reebok, in the 80s and when the aerobics exploded. But Reebok was really having explosive growth, and they were local. And so I was recruited by Reebok to come to one of their product management roles, which I accepted. Kind of hard to leave my first role, but I went to Reebok because I saw, there was probably going to be a lot more opportunity there. And I ended up at Reebok for about 14 years, between product management roles and sales roles. And one of my roles was the key account manager for the Foot Locker stores. You all familiar with them? And Lady Foot Locker, you see them all over the place. So I was the salesperson for Reebok for them for a couple of years. In the meantime, Foot Locker was opening stores in Europe, and they had about 300 stores in Europe, and they wanted Reebok to put somebody